Alright guys, so the Montreal Canadiens were able to draft forward Cole Caufield, which may just end up being the biggest steal within this whole draft. Of course, Cole Caufield was rated within the 5 to 10 range and slid all the way down to 15. If Cole Caufield ended up getting drafted within like the top 5, I would not have been surprised at all. So the fact that he slides all the way down to 15 right into the Montreal Canadiens' hands is amazing. When we look back on this draft in 5-10 years, this could just be the biggest steal within this draft. I've said it before and I'll say it again, but the game is changing. We are at a time in hockey where smaller, more skilled players are just able to dominate and take over games. Perhaps 10-20 years ago, this was not necessarily the case. Smaller players like a Cole Caufield were just not able to transition very well into the NHL based on their physical maturity. There's been many past drafts where smaller players didn't transition very well. One that I think of is Jordan Schrader in 2008-2009. The Vancouver Canucks drafted him 22nd overall in 2009. In Schrader's draft year, he put up 45 points in 35 games in the NCAA. Schrader was coming in at 5'8" and slid all the way down to 22 with that production. Now, of course, that was 10 years ago, but because of his lack in size, he was just not able to transition into the NHL. We are now in 2019 where smaller players are able to take over and just dominate based on pure skating ability and pure skill. Cole Caufield may easily just be the best goal scorer within this whole draft. His stats really just speak for themselves. This year he was over goal per game. He had 72 goals in 64 games. In the U18 championships, he had 14 goals in 7 games. Just, to be honest guys, just unreal totals. Totals we haven't seen for a very long time. And if we do see these totals, they're the first overall pick, like a Connor McDavid. Cole Caufield is just a natural goal scorer. If we even take a look back through the previous years of his hockey career, he is just a goal scorer. Last year with the U17 program, he put up 44 goals in 40 games. He also put up 23 goals in 32 games as a 16-year-old with the USDP. An obvious comparable to a Cole Caufield is Alex DeBrincat. Funny enough that they're actually listed within like the same measurements, coming in at 5'7", 165 pounds. In Alex DeBrincat's draft year, he put up 51 goals, 101 points in 60 games, and then in the following year, he put up 65 goals, 127 points in 63 games. Just crazy totals, and because of his size, he fell all the way down to the second round. And keep in mind guys, Alex DeBrincat was only drafted 3 years ago. And even though we're seeing more and more examples of smaller players being able to fully transition their skill into the NHL, we're still seeing a lot of teams not willing to take the chance. I do believe that this whole perception is going to change eventually. Give it 5-10 years, we're going to see a big shift in hockey where obviously it goes towards the more skilled guys. And the funny thing is I think the Montreal Canadiens were actually targeting a defenseman. Well, it's pretty obvious they were targeting a defenseman. But when Cole Caufield slides all the way to 15, you have to draft a Cole Caufield. The next 3 picks within this draft of the Montreal Canadiens were, you guessed it, left-handed defensemen. In the second round, they take Jayden Struble. Jayden Struble is a pretty interesting defenseman. He's actually going to go play in the BCHL next season, which is pretty unorthodox considering, you know, this is usually the time they'd be transitioning into the NCAA. But the upside is there. He's just going to be a player that comes in, 4 or 5 years from now rather than the next couple years. In the third round, they take Mattias Norlinder. Mattias Norlinder is an overager, but he does look like a great defenseman. He's looking like a good prospect. Then again, in the third round, you guessed it, they drafted Gianni Fairbrother. Fairbrother is a current left-handed defenseman playing with the Everett Silvertips and is definitely a solid defensive prospect. It is no coincidence that the Montreal Canadiens were lacking, that left-handed defenseman of the future, and that, obviously Cole Caufield slipped into their hands and they couldn't pass up on him. And then so they shifted their whole entire focus for the next 3 picks on left-handed defensemen to build out that pipeline. Cole Caufield is obviously going to be playing within the University of Wisconsin for at least, I would say, 2 more years. But the fact that the Montreal Canadiens were able to pick him up at 15 is, we may look back in 3-4 years and just think, what were other teams thinking? If I were a Montreal Canadiens fan, I would definitely be excited. Not to mention that the other best left-handed defenseman at this point within the draft was Cam York, and he was just drafted at 14 by the Philadelphia Flyers. So picking up Cole Caufield was really a no-brainer. But anyways guys, let me know what you think about Cole Caufield. Is he going to be a bust, or is he going to be able to transition all this skill into the NHL? I personally think he can. He's proved it time and time again that he is able to transition his goal-scoring ability into any league that he enters. And I think that a lot of GMs are going to be regretting this decision in 5-10 years. We'll see. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. That's my little rundown on Cole Caufield. Thanks for watching. See you guys.